You have been elected. You have been chosen to go to heaven. You will live for all of eternity in bliss and happiness. You are saved. Or you're going to hell. You're going to suffer forever. Right? What do you do with this predestination idea? This idea that you're going to be selected, that you are already chosen to live forever in salvation, right? It's an interesting idea. We talked about this yesterday, and we went over that you don't have a choice. But what does this mean? What next, right? Why were you selected? Now, I'm not 100% sure this stuff is true, but what is the next logical conclusion if we follow the Bible, right? This is the real key. Always ask yourself, what is next? And you will continue. Well, let's start off with reading what the Bible says, right? And granted, this is in English, so we're going to be very generous, but we've got a lot to pick from here. So, very first, Isaiah 45. What sorrows awaits those who argue with their creator? Does a clay pot argue with its maker? Does the clay dispute with the one who shapes it, saying, "Stop, you're doing it wrong"? Does the pot exclaim, "How clumsy can you be"? For you to ask, you were made to be elected. You're a saint. Or, why are you making me this way? Why are you making me that way? If you're going to live forever, right, you are going to grow. You're going to develop spiritually. You're going to ascend. You're going to have to change. You're going to have to be molded. You're going to have to learn things. Your perspectives and this is key, paradigm will elevate. Forever is a long time. What are you going to do with all that time? Well, if you are elected to be in alignment with God, and God is perfect, God is infallible, you would become more like God. And here's the interesting thing. God is, in the essence, forever and expanding. You'll never catch up. You're always going to be chasing to be more like God. We are the sons of God, it says. So we have to be changed, and there'll be more benefits with that. If you spiritually elevate, you'll have more things opened to you, and you'll have access to higher things you wouldn't imagine, you wouldn't even be able to understand, especially at the paradigms that we're at now. We would be, in a spiritual sense, very small in our current human state. We have very strong animal tendencies. We're very aligned in our animal needs. Now, how are you going to be elevated and be more like God, have a better understanding of the universe, right? Well, you have to be refined. And how are you refined? You are refined with fire, with pain. What is that? Let's read real quick. There's so many verses on this. There's so much in the Bible that talks about this over and over. A crucible for silver and a furnace for gold, but the Lord is the tester of hearts. This is Proverbs 17:3. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire, so you may be rich, and white garments, so that that you may clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness may not be seen, and a slave to anoint your eyes, or a salve to anoint your eyes, so that you may see. Okay, so that's Revelations 3:18. There's a ton of these. And why are we here? Right? Why are we elected? It's to become more like God. Why would we become more like God? Why? Now obviously, you and I, we would look at it as a benefit to us. Like, I get to be more like God. That's pretty cool. I get to have power, authority. I get to have more enjoyment out of life. Look, let's talk about it like, let's say it's a job. If you get promoted at a job, you make more money. That's great. But you're also going to have a lot more responsibilities and a lot more headaches. What is it? With much wisdom comes much sorrow. That one's very true. That one is very true. You know, the more you elevate, the more you understand the world, the more you see everyone around you, and they're in this haze, this fog, this cloud. They're in confusion. Because why? There's a spiritual war. Now, to me, these things are self-evident, irrelevant of the Bible, right? There is good forces and bad forces in the universe, right? And we are the battleground. Consciousness is the battleground. Our consciousness has to be elevated. Our understanding and awareness has to be elevated. But they're not going to want to let you do that. And who's they? The forces of evil, the lower paradigms, right? Just like there's, energy and lift, there's also gravity that pulls you down. And now this stuff, I'm getting more ethereal, but I think is very real, right? You are almost like a little window that God looks through, right? If you were a perfect absolute being who knew everything, could not be better, what better would there be for you to experience than yourself? There wouldn't be anything. It would be just you as God. And so you would create little versions of yourself to examine yourself in every aspect. You would do it not just once, not just twice, but in billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of computations in different variations and subsects. Because you are perfect, you're forever, you are going to see every aspect of yourself through your creation. And really, if you're God, there's nothing better for you to do than to understand yourself. This is where you start talking about simulation theory and how we're all here in this big AI simulation thing. A lot of people like to put it that way. But we are here for God's purposes, according to the Bible, for His glory, right? We are here for Him. And hopefully you're one of the ones that are here to experience His joy and His positive characteristics. Now that's the other half of predestination, is there is going to be a half of creatures, of beings, of consciousness to experience His negative aspects. That's quite terrifying, those that would have to experience hell, all of His awfulness. God created evil. It's a contrast to Himself and His perfectness, but you have to have an opposite. You have to be able to see the contrast, right? So everything here, as I understand it, is just a way for God to experience Himself, and we are a little window of consciousness for Him to experience Himself. The data you're collecting in your lifetime, all the things you see, all the things you understand, is you're just a little backup, decentralized piece of Him. Okay? So what are you going to do? Well, what your purpose is to do, for some more than others, just to become more aware, to expand. to become, maybe some people call it enlightenment. Some people say enlightenment, though, is never reached. It's just a moment. But you'll have to go through struggle. You'll have to experience negativity that pushes you away, and you have to have positivity to attract you. And it's towards, down here in hell is your negativity. Up here is your reward, heaven. You're in the middle, and you should be both, pushed up by hell and drawn up towards heaven. You're being refined. Let me know what you guys think about this. Think of the cross. What is the cross? It's a crosshair, right? You have a horizontal on the top of a vertical. It's a higher aim. What do you think happens once you go to heaven? You made it. You're done. You're there. We're going to sit around in robes and float around, play the harp, the lyre forever. Have, worship. There's always going to be spiritual development because the universe is so big. It could never be explored. It's a forever. Okay, I think I've made myself clear. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.